Primeval Buddha Samantabhadra, infinite light. Lord of the Himalayas Karsharpana, rainbow-bodied Padmasambhava, sovereign of the visible world, together with the emanations Rigzin Nyingpo, Bante, Urgyen Sangharakshita and his 8 great teachers. I pray to you all to grant me your adhisthana. The primevally pure, self-originated shunyata must be realized. Training in the hard, cutting, abrupt, skillful path, attaining the non-dual Jnanavaca, may my manifestations deliver the infinite living beings. So welcome everybody. Welcome here, welcome here at home. Welcome to the third part of this four-part series of talks on myths of the spiritual life. That verse that I've just recited, I wanted to start with it to, for my own sake, but also to illustrate something of what I'm trying to talk about this evening. That verse is from a Tibetan practice that we do in Triratna in the order. It's called the Guru Yoga. It's from the Nyingma tradition of Tibetan Buddhism. And it's a verse that I start off my meditation with every day. I actually repeat it many times. I've adapted it slightly to include Bante, my own teacher, Sangharakshita, and his teachers. The verse and the whole practice is about opening up to the blessings of the lineage of teachers, stretching all the way back. Well, I was going to say to the Buddha, but actually beyond the Buddha, to the primeval Buddha, the Buddha beyond time and space, infinite light, Amitabha, which is the Buddha that we've got on the shrine here. I'm not going to be able to explain the verse to you. At least that's not what I want to do today. But I wanted to start off with giving you an indication of at least the importance in my practice and the importance in many people's practice in Triratna, particularly once you're ordained in Triratna, of this myth of surrender. So this myth of surrender is, it's a myth that says, look, enlightenment, the goal, Buddhahood, is somehow outside of us, which is similar in a way to the myth of transcendence that I was talking about last week. The goal in transcendence is outside of us. But in the myth of transcendence, what we're trying to do is move towards, grow towards the goal, move towards enlightenment through our own efforts. In the myth of surrender, what we're trying to do is imagine that Buddhahood, enlightenment, is reaching down, coming to us. And what we're trying to do is become receptive to it, open up to it. It's reaching down to us all the time. So we're opening up to the blessings of the enlightened mind, which are always flowing according to this way of conceiving Buddhahood. And these myths, remember, they're metaphors. They're not, Buddhism's not saying this is exactly, absolutely how things are. How things are is beyond conception. Buddhahood is neither outside of us nor within us, because the whole notion of outside of us and within us is dualistic and breaks down when you try and think about enlightenment. Me and world, me and you, inside and outside, is part of the delusion that keeps us unenlightened. So there you are. There's no real way of talking about how things are in reality without using metaphor. And if you are going to use metaphor, you can choose which metaphor you're going to use. So these myths are ways of conceiving the goal and how we might relate to the goal using different metaphors. And metaphors, views, are important in Buddhism because they govern, they're not just nice stories, they govern how we will experience ourselves and experience Buddhism. Well, how we'll experience life, actually. So for me, reciting a verse like that every day, before I meditate, or in my meditation at the start, changes my experience of meditation. It's as if the blessings really are pouring down, and I feel that. And then I just open up to that and relax into that. So it's not just a story for me, it's an experience that's corroborated by this view. So, does that make sense? And then what happens is that the view is strengthened by the experience is strengthened by the view, and there's this sort of cycle. That's actually how views work all the time. You can choose positive views that are going to help you attain enlightenment or move towards it, or it to reach down towards you, or we can have negative views of life, views that say, look, I can't do this, I can't grow, I'm a miserable little worm, nobody loves me, and I shouldn't exist. That's a view, and guess what? If you hold that view, it'll be corroborated by your experience. Experience is always being interpreted by our minds and what we hold in our minds. It's not that you can have pure experience without interpretation. So these myths are very, very important because they are interpretive frameworks that help us. In this case, the myth helps us open up in a receptive way, helps us open up to enlightenment that's always trying to reach down to us. It's as if reality wants us to become enlightened, wants us to wake up. And there's something, something that's always, as it were, reaching down to us. At least that's one way of talking. And that's what I'm going to talk about. So in the tea break, Jnanavaca was saying to those of you online that I've been using films to illustrate these different myths. So we've had Sunshine, this sci-fi horror slasher movie, actually, which I was afterwards slightly regretful of introducing you to. Great film, though. I seem to be into horror at the moment. I've just been to see Megan. Have you seen? It's about a killer doll, AI killer doll. It's all the rage. It's very, very funny, but also very violent. So I'm not going to recommend that for this myth. It might have another myth embedded in it. But the film that I want to talk about is a Woody Allen film, all the way back to 1985. So that's before some of you were alive. I can remember the film coming out and going to see it. It won lots of awards when it came out. It won Best Picture at the Academy Awards and all sorts of other awards. And the film is called The Purple Rose of Cairo. Have you heard of The Purple Rose of Cairo? Nobody's heard of it. Some of you have heard of it. Okay, The Purple Rose of Cairo. So in the film, it's a great film, one of Woody Allen's finest films, I think. It deserves to be better known. In the film, and it's not a horror, you can watch this without fear. In the film, it's set in New Jersey in America in the Great Depression, and the main protagonist is this waitress called Cecilia, played by Mia Farrow, and Cecilia is just impoverished. She has a horrible life. Her boss in the restaurant where she works is a bully. At home, she's married to another bully, an abusive relationship with this guy. And one day, it all really collapses. I mean, like, he's horrible to her at home, and she loses her job. And not knowing, in a way, where to go, what to do, she goes to the cinema. And she watches this film called The Purple Rose of Cairo. And it's a black and white B-movie. It's a film about some rich Manhattan socialites who go over to Cairo to see the pyramids and they bump into, or they meet, this adventurer, archaeologist, handsome, pit-helmeted hero called Tom Baxter. And they say, hey, why don't you come over to Manhattan for a madcap weekend where we can go to the Copacabana Club? And he says, sure. And so they all come back to Manhattan, and they're all getting ready to go to the Copacabana Club for a night out. Anyway, that's the sort of start of the film, The Purple Rose of Cairo. It's a mad, silly movie. Mia Farrow's character in the real world, Cecilia, she's hooked onto this film, and she just watches it over and over again. So in a single day, she watches it 5 times. 5 times. She's just watching it back to back. And then the 5th time, Tom, who's this hero of the film, who's the explorer, the handsome Egyptian, the adventurer in Egypt, he suddenly gazes out of the screen, sees Cecilia, and says, you've been here 5 times. And he breaks the 4th wall, falls in love with her. She says, are you talking to me? And he says, yes. And he breaks the 4th wall. It's a black and white film, and he steps out of the film into this world of colour, sweeps her off her feet, and says, show me your real world. So the other characters in the film, this causes chaos, because they're now stranded in the film without Tom. They all break into argument because they don't know what to do. Some of them want to carry on the story without Tom. Others are saying, no, he's the lead. Others are taking offence at that and saying, no, he's just a minor bit part, and we can carry on without him. They all start to panic. A woman in the cinema faints as Tom comes out. Cecilia doesn't know what to do, but they fall madly in love, and Tom wants her to show him real life in New Jersey. So they go off on a sort of mad sort of night around New Jersey. She's totally smitten by this handsome young adventurer, Tom, who's perfect. He's meant to be perfect. He is the ideal human being, the ideal man. He's stepped from the silver screen into her life. Should I tell you a little bit more what happens? I'll say a little bit more. So the producers, the sort of executives of the production company and the director of the film, they're up in arms because what if Tom starts breaking out of the film in other cinemas as well? It'll ruin the film and their money-making venture. So they're suddenly up in arms. The director's getting the blame. Everybody can't, nobody can understand what's going on. Cecilia can't believe her luck. She's suddenly met the man of her dreams. She says to her friend, I've just met this wonderful man. He's fictional, but you can't have everything. And it's just a delightful film. Woody Allen is playing with what's real and what's not. What is real and what's not. And Cecilia, you can see what she's doing. She's longing, imaginatively longing to have a different life from the drudgery of her, the impoverishment of her own life. And on screen are these gods. They're wealthy, they're beautiful, they've got everything. And suddenly one of them reaches down into her world. So that's what I want to kind of talk about. Suddenly she sits there longing, and that longing is answered by Tom stepping down into her world. He's obviously completely clueless once he's in her world, So he finds that, for example, he's got all this money, but all that money is just fake money. So he can't believe that he can't spend it in the real world. You know, he goes for a coffee and she has to buy him it. And then when they finally kiss, he can't understand why the lights don't go out. There should be a fade out. So he's completely in this mad movie fantasy world, and they're trying to meet each other halfway. You can already start to see how this won't work, can't you? You can sort of see it's never going to work. This because although Woody Allen is pointing to something that we yearn for, some God reaching down into our world, he's also pointing to the pitfalls of this myth. And in this talk, I want to talk about the sort of front and back, the advantages and the pitfalls, the back of this myth, just like we've done with the other myths. But last week, and some of you will remember, in a way, don't worry if you weren't here last week, but last week, in the myth of self-transcendence, when we were talking about the pitfalls, one of them was that, well, the transcendence myth is all to do with our will, and striving, using our will, our sort of egoistic drive to move towards enlightenment. And there are all sorts of problems with that. One of which is, well, you can burn out, you can get fed up, you can sort of give up. You can feel that you're not good enough. You know, how can you actually reach enlightenment? Another sort of more perhaps profound, or at least philosophical, objection to that self-transcendence myth is how can the ego ever use the will, its own will, to overcome the ego, to see through the ego. This was a problem that Bhante Sangharakshita, my own teacher, felt that he needed to address when he was a young man in India. He was a wandering sadhu, a freelance, for 2 years before he was ordained into a Buddhist order. He was a wandering freelance sort of ascetic, just wandering barefoot in robes, given up all identity papers, given up all money, and he wandered around in India with a companion, with a friend, for 2 years. And one of the things he wondered was, how do you sort of surrender, how do you give up your own will? Because he could see that using your own will to overcome egotism had a paradox to it. Do you see what I mean? We didn't come on to that last week, but I think that is a fundamental kind of conundrum in self-transcendence. And the answer, of course, is in this myth of self-surrender. He came across a book by Thomas Merton, who was a Jesuit mystic, a Christian mystic. And in Thomas Merton's book, what Bhante read was that you need to surrender your will to somebody else. And Bhante tried to do that. He found a teacher, Jagdish Kashyapji, who was teaching him Pali and logic, Buddhist logic. And he was an academic. And Bhante tried to say, look, I'll just do whatever you want me to do. I'll give up my will to you. Jagdish Kashyap, it was quite difficult to do because he was a very modest man and he wanted to defer to Bhante. And so neither of them could quite, it didn't always work, but Bhante tried to follow this path of self-surrender very early on. Later on, when he was an ordained Buddhist, he came across some Tibetan teachers, and he received, I've forgotten the year, it's in the 1950s, he received an initiation into an archetypal Buddhist figure called Green Tara, and she is the embodiment of enlightened compassion. She's a Buddha figure, the embodiment of enlightened compassion. And he said that from that point on, he felt as if his life was guided from above, from beyond, from another dimension. This meditation practice was more than a meditation practice. It's a myth for his life. Green Tara was an image of Buddhahood that was reaching down to him. And from then on, being the guiding influence of his life. This myth is, I think, the religious myth, isn't it? The religious myth par excellence. Until maybe a few hundred years ago, most human beings would have believed is not the right word, they would have had this myth in their life as a guiding thing, whatever religion they had. This myth was the guiding myth of humanity. And so much so that certainly in the Buddhist tradition, Buddhism is non-theistic, so it doesn't believe in a creator God. But nevertheless, this myth would have been so much the guiding, well, it would have been so embedded in tradition that you wouldn't have thought to even call it a myth. People would have, in the Buddha's time, worshipped the Buddha. And then after the Buddha's parinirvana, after the death of his body, they would have brought to mind the Buddha and worshipped him as an embodiment of enlightenment, even after the death of the body. That was the natural response: reverence, gratitude, worship. And no matter where you go in the Buddhist world today, you'll find that, apart from perhaps in our very, very recent few decades in the West, where, guess what, Buddhism has started to become secularized. And there are even now Western Buddhist teachers who are saying that you don't need this myth because Buddhism is can be understood rationally, and all you need is a self-development myth. Yeah. The trouble with that is that I think it can reduce Buddhism to another sort of self-help therapy. And I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with self-help or therapy, but it won't lead you to enlightenment on its own, because you've always got this problem of transcending the self. So self-help, growth of self, can be helpful to live a happy, healthy life, but when are you going to then go beyond self into this transcendent realm that is beyond self and other, is not dualistic in that way? Yeah. How are you going to do that just with the transcendence myth? You can actually, each of these myths you can follow, but there are pitfalls, and the pitfalls of the self-transcendence myth are answered by the self-surrender myth. That's what I'm trying to say. Yeah? The self-surrender myth compensates for the lack in the self-transcendence myth, and it is the religious myth par excellence. And I think it's also, there's something essential about it, but I think it's also problematic for us, because living in our postmodern kind of westernized, secularized, rationalistic, scientific materialist world, where many people have had either bad experiences of religion or have just lost all contact with anything religious. Living in that world, this myth feels really foreign to us, and we can be really suspicious of it. We know what harm religion has done in the world and continues to do in the world, and we're right to be, in a way, worried about this myth. We're right to be suspicious of it, and yet we want to worship. We want to worship. We want to always have a sense that there's some meaning beyond our lives that gives our life meaning. If our meaning in our lives is just to be found in our lives, our little lives, that is a very impoverished way to live. So Cecilia knows that, well, she intuits that there's more. She uses her imagination to find that more in cinema. Yeah? And in this film, the world of the film speaks back to her, yeah? Which is a metaphor for this myth. So this myth is particularly the myth of imagination. It's imagination Buddhism, at least as explained to us by Bhante, by Sankaracharya, is not just fantasy. I know that in fantasy, fantasy is like this escape from reality, and arguably that's what Cecilia's doing in The Purple Rose of Cairo. She's trying to escape from her awful life into fantasy. But imagination, genuine imagination with a capital I, is more than fantasy. It's not fantasy. It's a higher faculty that is trying to apprehend meaning and truth through an amalgam of reason and imagination and will. It's a faculty that is alive to metaphor, to symbolism, to poetry, to beauty, to meaning that is beyond the rational, not under the rational. And no matter how much we might think that we don't believe in this myth, that this myth doesn't have any place in our life, look at what happens at moments of significance in our life. To take a relatively trivial example, when it's your birthday, you probably want it marked, don't you? I've sometimes had birthdays where I'm on my own. I mean, I live with others in the community upstairs, but there have been birthdays where I've been on a solitary retreat. At one of our retreat centres. And sometimes on those birthdays, it's on the 10th of October if anybody's worried. Sometimes on those birthdays, the team at the retreat centre that I'm at have remembered that it's my birthday, even though I've not told them. They've looked it up somewhere, and left me some chocolate or some treat in my sort of bin, and sometimes they haven't. And I'm 57 and I've had loads of birthdays, but I do find myself, if this happens, just sort of checking my sort of supply bin to see, several times to see if they've remembered. How pathetic in that. But there you go. That's what we want our birthday remembered, don't we? Rationally, that doesn't make any sense. It's just one more day, yeah. Or marking Christmas, whether you're Christian or not. Somehow, marking Christmas feels important, doesn't it? Why do we do that? Marking New Year's Day. The calendar is a human construct. It wasn't like that a few hundred years ago. New Year's Day wouldn't have been on New Year's Day. The Chinese don't celebrate New Year's Day. The Indians don't celebrate New Year's Day on the 1st of January. But we instinctively think, oh no, something really significant's happening on midnight on the 1st of January or the 31st of December. What about when somebody dies? You lose somebody. If we are a secular scientific materialist, we will rationally think that the body, once the body dies, the lights have gone out and there's nothing beyond. No consciousness survives the death of the body. And yet, what do we do with that body? We don't just put it in a skip. Not just for health and safety reasons. We don't do that. We mark. We want some sort of ritual, don't we? So I'm trying to point out that we're meaning-seeking creatures. We're value-seeking creatures. Value is really important to us. Meaning is really important to us. And this myth is still alive for us. This myth that there's something more beyond this material world, beyond the material body, that we're sort of calling out to, reaching out to. It's still really important to us, but it's often in a very impoverished way, and a way that is at odds with the values or the beliefs that we profess to have, contradictory to that. So I'm just saying that it is alive. We worship. What do we worship if you're a secular materialist? What other things do you worship? Maybe not you, but what do we worship? Science. Who said that? Yeah, and can you say a little bit more about what you mean by that.
Yeah, there's a sense that it has an answer for every last kind of challenge or mystery that we face.
Yeah, that's a sense, I'm going to repeat that for the microphone, a sense, tell me your name?
Dylan.
Dylan's saying that science, there's a sense in which science will, we believe that science will have an answer for every challenge, every mystery that we face, that science will be able to answer the questions of everything. As somebody who studied science when I was a young man, I don't believe that. I really don't believe that. If anything, what physics opens up is a world that is more mysterious, not less mysterious, than our common sense perceptions. Are wildly more mysterious. Yeah, science. What else do we worship? Yes.
Beauty.
Yes. Now can you say more about beauty, Alison?
Well, it's something we value hugely in our lives. We go to very special places where it's there. The building has been made for this beauty to be exhibited.
Yes.
And it would be hard to find anybody who didn't have a concept of that.
Yes, thank you. So Alison's saying beauty is something that we worship, that it's something that we find value in, or leads us in the direction of value, and it'd be hard to find anybody that didn't respond to that. And I think that's true. Certainly if somebody couldn't respond to beauty, had no sense of beauty, no aesthetic sense at all, and I don't just mean visual beauty, I mean beauty through any of the senses. If somebody couldn't respond to that, I think they would be living a very impoverished life. I think beauty is extremely important, and in Sri Ratna and in Bante's presentation of the Dharma, he's given it a huge importance as saying, look, it's through beauty that you can intimate what this transcendent realm is like. He's in that sense, I think he's been influenced by Plato and Plato's ideas of a hierarchy of beauty, from beauty of like a beautiful form, a beautiful person, beautiful in the world of form, a beautiful looking person, all the way to beauties of the beauty of the mind, the beauty of morals, the beauty of goodness itself, formless beauty, and then Plato has beauty itself, beyond conception, beyond form. So I think beauty as a path can lead us to the sorts of values that I'm trying to touch on. Really, really positive. So it's a positive thing to worship. It can, of course, turn into something that becomes an end in itself. Say you're just stuck at the level of worshipping beautiful people. Well, as you get older, that just gets more painful and more fruitless and rather tragic. Yeah? So it can become an end in itself at a particular level, or you can treat it as a path. Yeah. Anybody else? Thank you. Yes.
Family unit.
Yeah, the family unit as a myth, as something that gives complete meaning to our life and will fulfill us, that we can worship. Tell me your name. Georgia. Yeah, the family unit. I think, part of the family unit is the romantic couple, and then any children that they have, or that nuclear family unit. And I think in our culture that is part of what's sold to us as the ideal life. You have an ideal family, and I'm not saying that is something not to have, but from a dharmic perspective, it'll not fulfill completely. It'll never completely fulfill, because you're still searching for complete fulfillment amongst finite, human, fallible people. And and certainly it's a precarious ideal to live by. Why is it precarious? Georgia, do you want to say?
Why is it precarious? No, nothing.
No? Anybody else? Why is it precarious?
Unreliable.
Unreliable? Say something else. I missed that.
Human beings are imperfect.
Human beings are imperfect. Who's been let down in a romantic way? Yeah. And if you haven't, well, I really wish you well. I really wish you well. And maybe you'll be fortunate. But I suspect that if you are fortunate, that will have been because you have a lot of maturity and so does your partner, and willingness to compromise and not live in some sort of fantasy of the ideal person. Does that make sense? Anything else that we worship?
Well,
Sorry, Don, who was over there?
I said wealth and fame.
Wealth and fame, yeah, wealth and fame. And if that worked, then we would, certainly wealth, if wealth worked, then our culture, even everybody in this room, is probably more wealthy than most of humanity has been throughout human history. If wealth really made us completely fulfilled, we would all be radiantly happy. I know not everybody in this country, I mean, there are people who are homeless and on the streets and so forth, but the majority of people in this country, we live in a very wealthy time and a very wealthy nation. The current economic crisis notwithstanding, compared to so many people in the world, the majority of people in the world, we have more wealth, and yet we live in a culture where there's so much suffering, mental health suffering particularly, as well as other types of suffering. Yeah. And fame, you said. Yeah, fame. Has anybody achieved any fame in this room? You have a bit, Peter, haven't you?
Yeah, a little bit, yeah.
A little bit. And has it worked? Peter's a musician.
It's worked now, yeah.
It won't now, no.
No, it certainly hasn't enlightened me. It's addictive as well.
It's what?
Addictive.
Addictive, yeah. And I suspect that what happens with things like fame, I'm not famous myself, although I have got a few YouTube people watching me, is that it runs out on you very, very quickly. It runs out on you very, very quickly. All of these things, they're not bad in themselves most of the time, but they run out on you. They don't lead to complete fulfillment. All I'm trying to say is that we do worship, but we worship ideals that don't completely fulfill. In the past, people would have worshipped God in some form or other. Yeah? And in Buddhism, we don't have God. So what do you think in Buddhism is, what are we worshipping? What are we really worshipping?
Our potential.
What Buddhism says, what the Buddha saw, I was talking about it last week, he said that he saw all of us as potential Buddhas, as potential enlightened beings. And that potential can be realized. So that's one way of thinking about what we worship. Any other ways of thinking about it? Well, what the Buddha said was that it's like enlightenment is a force in reality in the universe. There's something in reality in the universe that wants to be known through us, that wants us to wake up to it. Buddhism doesn't personify it necessarily as God, or if it does, it's not a creator God. It personifies it in terms of images, like the Buddha. But it does say that there is something, as it were, in reality that is of the nature of the enlightened mind. And in this myth, that's definitely something that you're trying to open up to. At least that's one way of looking at it. So I want to just see if we can move on, and I've talked a little bit about why this myth might be important, but see if we can find any other reasons why this, what's good about this myth, and then we'll come on to the cons of this myth, the dangers of this myth, the back end of this myth. But let's start with what's good about this myth. Why is it a positive myth, this myth of self-surrender? Surrendering to something beyond ourselves. Why is that a positive thing?
Connection to infinite potential.
Say that again?
Connection to infinite potential.
Connection to infinite potential. Can you say a bit more about what you mean by that?
Just the nature of infinity. It's expansive rather than contractive. It's not self-limiting. It's anything is possible.
Yeah. So tell me your name? Johnny, yeah. So Johnny's saying connection to infinite potential. It's expansive. It's this myth that expands and says there's possibility, anything's possible. It's I think it's saying that there's something more than me in the universe, and I'm trying to connect to it. If you don't believe that there's something more than you in the universe, then your life is limited to you. And I think that is quite a narrow way of living. I think even psychologists would agree that if you want to live a fulfilled life, you probably have to have some sense of living for something more than self, be that family or some sort of ideal, some sort of, many people have vocations that they dedicate their lives to, trying to make the world a better place in some form or other. I think to have some sort of sense of a life well lived, of a fulfilled life, we have to have in it something more than living for ourselves. If we're just living for ourselves, what do you think happens? Yeah.
Well, we're just not able to see all the implications of living for ourselves, insofar as you might make decisions that you think is best for you in that moment, but sort of the consequences later down the line are not actually helpful.
Yes.
If you're choosing yourself over, say, other family members, friends, people like that, then you sort of cut off things that you can be receptive to instead of actually growing in towards that.
Yeah. I think if we are just living for ourselves, we cut off from other people and the world around us. What happens, I think, is that thanks James, we become more and more self-obsessed and self-centered. And self-obsession and self-centeredness very, very easily leads to a downward spiral of mental health issues like, narcissism, depression, depending on which way you want to go, are both dangers of a self-obsessed, self-centered world. I'm not saying that everybody who's depressed is because they're self-centered, but I think if one is very self-obsessed and self-centered, it can become like a narrow prison. The mind becomes like a narrow vortex. Everything pings back to me. And when life is working out for you, that might be okay, but sooner or later, life doesn't always meet your desires, and it becomes very, very painful and narrow, because there's nothing beyond me and my desires. I think this myth also is a myth that includes the heart. It includes our emotional world. When we fall in love, we're in the grip of this myth, both positively, because love can be wonderfully expansive and expanding, and suddenly everything looks beautiful. Not just your lover, but potentially the whole world looks beautiful. It can narrow down, though, love into a more sort of exclusive, self-centered kind of attachment. but potentially, when Cecilia falls in love and Tom falls in love with her, there's this wonderful expansion. It's the myth of this myth of surrender. This myth includes the heart. The myth last week of self-transcendence primarily focused on will, on effort. And do you remember the film that I was talking about was Free Solo? And the guy in that, Alex Honnold, who climbs Free Solo, he climbs El Capitan in Yosemite National Park and lives to tell the tale. When he falls in love, he starts having more accidents in his climbing. Yeah? It's like he'd narrowed down everything in his world to just sheer willpower. That enabled him to succeed at climbing. But if he opened up emotionally, it was all rather much more shaky. But not opening up emotionally is a very narrow way of living. I know you can succeed in a narrow way, like climbing El Capitan, Free Solo, if you want to. You will need a lot of will. He has a lot of will. But it's to the exclusion of lots of other things in his life that most people would consider gives life meaning. Yeah? So this myth includes the heart. It also counters a sort of ego appropriation. Goes back to what I was saying about how can you transcend egotism using your own will. This myth says, no, there's more to me, more to my life. I'm trying to open up to the divine. And that will stop us becoming, or mitigate against us becoming more conceited. And in the spiritual life, if you keep practicing, you will have, hopefully, you'll have experiences that are very expansive. In meditation, you can have all sorts of beautiful, blissful experiences. If you're not careful, you can start to think, oh, that makes me special. Yeah. And guess what? I am now closer to enlightenment, and you're not. And and I'm better than you. And you start to use any spiritual success, as it were, as just bolstering your own sense of egotism. Does that make sense? This myth counters that. It's not me, it's not mine, it's something beyond me that I'm trying to open up to. Okay, so there's more I could say about the strengths of this myth, but I want to move on to some of the dangers, the pitfalls, the back end of this myth. So what do you think are some of the dangers of this myth? Of opening up to something beyond self, to the divine. Yes?
Surrender in a way that's not very surrendering.
Oh yeah, say more. What do you mean by surrendering in a way that's not very surrendering?
Let's say you want something from surrendering.
Ah yes, okay. What would you want? Yeah. So in a way what you can do is it's still about me and still about self, but it's a sort of conditional surrender. Yeah. So I will pray to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas as long as I get what I want. I will try and do puja and mantra and open up to something beyond, but it's very much still to do with what I want. And then if I don't get what I want, one of the bargaining things that you can do with, well, I've certainly done it with Buddhism, is I'll practice Buddhism as long as I get a happy life out of it. As long as it then works, I'll practice Buddhism. I'll do all the good things like being generous and kind and whatever. But the condition is, and of course it's not a condition that I would ever admit to and hardly mention to myself. Tell you what, the bargain is, I have a great life, a happy life, a fulfilled life. Actually, what Buddhism promises you is that at the ordinary mundane level of conditioned existence, there will be pain. It will not work out. Life will not work out at its own level. Yeah. there is some fulfillment, but it's not about me being fulfilled. I was watching an interview with Bernardo Kastrup, who's a scientist and philosopher, on the Nature of Mind series. Viryadeva interviewed him. He's an idealist in that he believes that consciousness is primary. Actually, consciousness is all there is. Not my consciousness or your consciousness, but a universal consciousness, and that everything is happening within that. You could say, I won't try and elaborate on what he believes. Anyway, he was saying one of the great delusions of our culture is that we think our life is about us. And it's true, isn't it? I think my life is really about me. And I bet you do too, unless you're enlightened. And you can tell me later if you are. But I bet, unless you're enlightened, you think your life is about you. Would you agree? Yeah? Buddhism is trying to say, guess what Buddhism is trying to say? It's not. And Bernardo Kastrup was saying, guess what? It's not. He was saying it would be much better, truer, realer, and freeing to think in terms of what does the universe, what does reality want from you, want from your life, and that your life is about serving that. What does reality want to do through you? And this myth says that. Do you see what I mean? It's saying, what does enlightenment, the Buddha, the enlightened mind, want to do through you? It's not about you. In a way, what happens to me and what happens to you, in terms of our own small-minded desires, is irrelevant to what life is about. So that's quite a challenging thing, isn't it? But let's keep going with the back of this myth. What else might be? Yes, John.
It might sort of dampen the questioning mind.
Yeah, it might dampen the questioning mind. Can you say a bit more about how it might do that? I think you're onto something.
I suppose like blind faith.
Blind faith, yes. And we know what all the dangers of blind faith are. When you sort of say, I'm going to let go of reason, I'm not going to think for myself, I'm not going to question what I'm told, there's a real danger there that you'll be subsumed into some dogma. And religion has used people's credulity at times. It's a sort of credulous literalism, a gullibility that religion has used. Not just religion, politics has used it, fascism used it, communism used it. People became enslaved to ideologies, religious or non-religious, that has caused, and continues to in some cases, cause great harm in the world. So one of the things that certainly Buddhism says is that don't let go of your reason. I mean, don't stop thinking for yourself. Don't stop questioning. The Buddha encouraged people to question and test the teachings in their own experience. Like you'd do a sort of scientific experiment. We often say this when somebody goes on retreat. What I say sometimes anyway is that, look, just throw yourself into the retreat and in a way, during the retreat, just do the whole program. But after the retreat, evaluate it and see, did it work for you? How else can you test something apart from trying it and then questioning it? So yeah, the back end of this myth, if you take this myth literally in the wrong way, it can lead to a blind faith. And that's not helpful. Yeah, good, thank you. Yes, I saw your hand go up and I'll try and come back to you.
I think that people have a lot of fear about there not being meaning in their life.
Yeah.
And believing in something divine that gives to life meaning provides a psychological relief of that fear.
Yes.
So for me, actually, that was always the main argument, that there is nothing divine because we have such a strong motivation to believe in something divine.
Yeah. So believing in this need to believe in something beyond self and something divine can lead to a sort of, I don't know, superstition, magical thinking, fantasy. it can lead people into all sorts of delusion. And you know, I was trying to make the distinction between fantasy and imagination. Well, I think this myth can just step into fantasy, and then we live in a very sort of weird, deluded way. Cecilia in The Purple Rose of Cairo arguably is stepping into fantasy, except the fantasy steps towards her. That's where it's more interesting. It's not like she's just losing herself in the cinema. Tom Baxter, this hero, steps towards her. But arguably, they're both living in some sort of fantasy. He wants to be in the real world, which for him is sort of fantastical, and she wants to live in his world, which is equally sort of fantastical. So yes, I think you've got to sort of be careful of something that is just escapist, really. Yeah. Yes, you were going to say.
Yeah, it could become a bit of a kind of sticking plaster approach. So in a very sort of half-hearted manner, it can just be dabbling, which is very easy to do.
I think it is.
As opposed to committing.
Yeah, I think it is. A sticking plaster approach. Well, there's two things there. A sticking plaster approach, again, is like saying, look, I'm not going to it's a bit like escapism. I'm not going to really face up to the issues in my life. The real suffering that I might have in my life. I'm just going to cover it over with this kind of gloss of Buddhism in a certain way. So, but it could also be sort of, you said dabbling. I think that's interesting. I think that not committing is what you were saying. I think Buddhism, in a way, I'm hesitant to say that you need commitment, because actually when you start practicing, it will be dabbling. When I first started practicing Buddhism, it was dabbling. I wasn't committed. I was sort of testing the water and seeing if it worked. For it to really work, though, gradually, and at your own rate, you need to make commitment. Like meditation, for example. Let's not just talk about Buddhism, let's just focus on meditation. You can start off dabbling, and it might give something to you. But if it's going to really transform your life, you need to make a commitment to doing a regular meditation practice. There you go. That's how it is, and that's how it is with all aspects of Buddhism, including ritual, devotion, prayer, and all the aspects of this myth. I think it can also lead this myth to, somebody in the tea break was talking about online, they were talking about a fear that it'll lead to a disappointment, that I'm not good enough. For real Buddhists, they may be able to open up to enlightenment, but for me it won't work. So when I try and do that, really, it's just going to lead to disappointment. So I won't try, because it's a risk to open your heart, and then to be disappointed. So Cecilia, I'm going to go back to the film. Cecilia opens her heart. Tom steps in off the screen, and all hell has broken loose on the screen. One of the characters, the cinema owner is just going to turn the projector off, and he's saying, no, please don't turn the projector off, because every time you do that, the lights go out and we disappear, and it's awful. So please don't turn the projector off. He keeps the projector playing, but all the characters in the film, in The Purple Rose of Cairo, are now at a loose end. Meanwhile, in Cecilia's world, the real world, the actor who played Tom is worried that Tom going off screen into the real world is going to ruin his career. Because he played Tom, and now he'll be seen as an unreliable actor, because what if his characters just keep walking off the screen into the world? Nobody will employ him. So he's very worried that he's got to get Tom back onto the screen and into the film. And what he does is he comes over from Hollywood to New Jersey to meet Cecilia, and he's called Gil. And he says to Cecilia, look, I'm in love with you. I've fallen every time. The first time I saw you, I just fell in love with you. And forget Tom. I'm the real thing. Yeah. And at one point, you have this meeting between Tom, Gil, and Cecilia. And she says something like, I'm really confused, I'm married, and now I'm in love with two people, and they're both the same person. And Tom says, I'm loyal, dependable, trustworthy, I've got everything. And Gil says, yeah, but I'm real. And they get Cecilia to choose. You know, one of the characters on screen is saying to Cecilia, go for Tom, go for Tom. Tom is perfect. He's your perfect man. The perfect man. The other characters on the screen are saying, but if Tom doesn't come back, what will happen to us? So they're urging Cecilia to go for Gil. And what does she do? I'm going to give it all away. She goes for Gil, because Gil is real. And Tom, who's devastated, goes back into the film, into the Purple Rose of Cairo. He steps back into the screen. But of course what happens is that Gil betrays her. He wasn't in love with her at all. He was just using that to get Tom back into the story, into the Purple Rose. And Cecilia is devastated as Tom just does a runner back to Hollywood. And you see him on the plane, this look of guilt and remorse on his face as he knows that he's done something awful. And Cecilia has left her husband for Gil and now has nothing. And you see her with a suitcase. Suddenly this comedy, this fantasy, this imaginative fantasy has turned into a tragedy. And Cecilia goes back into the cinema, and she's now it's another film that's on, and it's Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers, and he's singing "Heaven, I'm in Heaven," and she just is sort of staring entranced at the screen, but is moved by the film. So it doesn't go well for Cecilia. There is a real disappointment because it was a fantasy. It was a fantasy. For us, though, I think it's important to risk opening the heart. More than that, it's important to risk opening your mind, the imagination. It's important to risk training our imagination in values like beauty and love. It's important, I think, to imagine that there's value beyond this life, meaning beyond this life, and that's actually what gives this life meaning. If you do start to imagine that, and at first it might feel clunky and artificial, and as if we're doing a sort of what's if kind of exercise, what if kind of exercise. But if you do imagine that and go along with that without losing your rational faculty and your questioning faculty, if you do that, sometimes something opens up. Something opens up. It's as if you look at the universe through particular eyes, it will look back at you. Because the world is not dualistic in this self-other way. Somehow we're part of something that is indescribable and won't fit with our conceptual framework. If you think you understand what reality is and who you are, you haven't thought deeply enough. You really haven't. The world, experience, life is incomprehensible. And the one rational response is to open up in a sense of wonder, open up to a sense of beauty, to open up to awe, to ask for blessings, and then see what happens. see what happens. If you do that without being gullible, I'm asking us to, in a way, ditch cynicism, ditch unhelpful skepticism, but don't become gullible as well. It's a really fine line, this. Do you see what I mean? You can become dismissive and cynical, in which case I think we've lost a piece of our humanity that's really important. We could also go to the other extreme and just become credulous, gullible, and slip into fantasy land. And that, too, is dangerous. It's childish. It's too cheap, in a way, as a solution. There is something between those two extremes that is, I think, about really finding our humanity and opening up to something that takes us beyond that humanity. I believe Buddhism treads a line between those two extremes, and I hope that you find that. I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Come back next week for the final myth. I'm going to actually do 2 myths next week in one. Maybe 2 films, maybe just 1 film. I don't quite know. But come back and find out. In the meantime, go and watch The Purple Rose of Cairo. Thank you.